I would like to welcome our two presenters, Rakesh Patel and Paul Wallace, and they will introduce themselves in more detail when we get to them. I am just going to launch a poll to get us started to see where we are at the beginning. I've launched the poll now and I'll give it a few moments. If people have a visual impairment or are using a screen reader, it should take a minute or two to detect. And then remember to submit your answers at the end. I see lots of people are in there now, so that's fantastic. That's all working really well. We love it when the technology works in these sessions. And now I'm just going to share my slides, if you bear with me. I'll give the poll a few more seconds. Great. We're just waiting a few more seconds for the poll to give everybody a chance. You're all very welcome. I hope we've got some newbies as well as all our usual regulars. It's great to have you and thank you for spending your evening with us. I'll close the poll now. I think everybody's had a go. Nearly there. Just 1 second. There's a few more clicking away in the background. Great. I think we've got most of you there on the poll, so that's wonderful. So welcome to everybody here on Zoom and on our other platforms. I would really like to thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Peter Holton, and I'm the Training and Engagement Officer for Glaucoma UK for Northern England. I would like to introduce Rakesh Patel, better known as Kesh, who will share his lived experience of advanced glaucoma with us, and Paul Wallace, a low vision specialist, who will share his knowledge and expertise on sight loss with us. For the focus of this session, we are going to cover living well with advanced glaucoma and sight loss. We've already done the poll, so that's great to get your feedback at the start. And then I've got to read out this statement. We are enormously grateful to Rakesh and Paul for generously giving us their time to present on this webinar. We specifically invite speakers who are knowledgeable on the topics being presented. The information shared tonight is based on their own experience and knowledge and does not replace individual medical advice. Your circumstances are unique to you. So if you are thinking of making any lifestyle or medical changes as a result of this webinar, please do speak to your eye specialist first. Glaucoma UK and the speakers are not responsible for any action you might take as a result of the information we're sharing in the webinar. So please don't forget to ask questions in the Q&A function. And please like any questions you like so we can answer the most popular ones. We have had a couple of clinical questions through about the treatment of advanced glaucoma beforehand, and the answers to those questions will depend on each person's individual case. For example, why the bleb is leaking, potential tube surgery after a trab, but will depend if this is appropriate in your individual case. As I said before, everybody is individual. And if you're watching this live on one of the social media platforms, please ask your questions in the comments and my colleague Conchita will feed them into us so we can answer them. We've got about an hour today, but if afterwards you need more information or support, we'll touch on how you can get that in at the end. I'm going to hand over now to Kesh, and off you go, Kesh.
Thank you, Peter. Hi, everyone. My name's Kesh. Thank you for taking the time this evening, to come and listen to my story. I'll try and make it an interesting one. Hopefully, some of it will resonate with some of you and, maybe even, I guess, shine some light on your own personal journeys with glaucoma. I'm going to give you a little bit of background first, um, just to provide some context, really. So I've worked in the health and fitness industry for over 30 years, as a strength and conditioning coach, as a nutritionist, as a lecturer and a writer mostly. And it was only kind of recently I realized I kind of managed all of this with vision loss, along the way. And I'll use the term managed quite loosely, because it wasn't an easy ride. There was plenty of ups and downs. There was loads of challenges, and I'll share some of those with you, today. I'm currently registered as severely sight impaired. So that was a recent thing. I did that this year. I'm 52 now, so I've had this. I've had sight impairment for a long, long time, as I'll explain, and share with you. So I guess my journey started, quite a long time ago. Actually, I was 6 years old and I developed myopia. So I had it from a really young age, and kind of fast forward towards my late teens and early 20s was, when I officially had extreme myopia. So again, if some of you are short-sighted, you'll understand these, but I had my eyes, we're talking figures of kind of -12, -13 diopters in each eye. So it was pretty bad, at least enough to affect my vision. But it wasn't until the age of 27, that I was diagnosed with glaucoma. And by the time I was 30, so in those next kind of 2, 3 years, I had already had two trabeculectomies, so one in each eye. I would probably say those 2 years post-diagnosis were the hardest, I've had to kind of go through. The prospect of losing your sight at any age, is awful. And I was at that kind of young age where, everything, was settling down, my career was on the go. And yeah, it kind of knocked me sideways, that diagnosis really. But during my 30s was really when I started to see the effects of it. So that's when I lost a lot of my peripheral vision. So currently, I've lost a lot up here and down to the sides. It's fairly stable now, but that mainly happened in my 30s. And unfortunately, mid 30s to late 30s, I had cataracts forming in both eyes. So about 5 years later, in my early 40s, I had cataracts removed from both eyes. Um, and then up till now, like I said, I'm 52 years old now. Um, I'm currently on eye drops. I've probably tried every single eye drop out there, but I'm currently on 3 eye drops daily, and they seem to kind of keep my pressures, pretty stable. Because of my background as well in health and fitness, I do also consider exercise and nutrition, really important, if not more important, parts of my treatment and management as well, alongside my eye drops. But I think, I have a good ophthalmologist now, and I'm very fortunate to have kind of pretty stable pressures, at the age that I am now, really. I mean, I mentioned before, there's been so many challenges along the way, and probably too many to mention here. But I'm going to give you an idea because like glaucoma and vision loss come with so many different unique symptoms, and many of you will have your own. For me, and some of you may be able to relate to this, but I think the biggest daily challenge for me is, sensitivity to light and contrast sensitivity. I constantly live in a world where it's almost like you have this dream filter on, where the edges are just slightly whited out, and it's almost like, a lot of people describe it as living in like a steamy shower room. It's that's what I see most of the time. And with that comes, contrast sensitivity. So anything with a white screen or white background, I find it extremely challenging to read what's in the foreground. So reading letters on white paper, filling out forms, reading menus in restaurants. And then when you add in the low light, like in a pub or a restaurant, or you go outside in really bright light, that just kind of exacerbates that contrast sensitivity. But having said that, there are actually so many different ways to kind of overcome that. My wife laughs at me, but I call it low contrast living because I love cooking. So, for example, in my kitchen, I have different color kitchen utensils. You know, you have knives with different color handles so you can see them easily. I have a white chopping board and I have a black chopping board. You know, because I've learned the hard way that if I try and chop potatoes on a white chopping board, it's game over for my fingers. So, you know, there's lots of little things that I've done. If you look around my office, it's all black and white, you know, very little white, but lots of black, and there's lots of high contrast everywhere. The other thing as well, you know, obviously that sensitivity comes at another cost, which is I my screen time, I try and keep it down as possible. So, you know, looking at screens is difficult. So I live in dark mode most of the time. You know, thank God for dark mode on my phone, on my computer. You know, my hearing is has become very acute now. So, you know, I use different types of technology that kind of help with that. You know, I have Shocks headphones, which are bone conduction. I have my microphone, so I dictate everything, you know, so I don't have to type. I can still type. I have a large print keyboard, but if I can activate it with a voice command, you know, I'll do that. You know, I've set up various different AI-driven shortcuts on my phone. So with a single press of a button, I can point my camera at anything, whether it's a letter, cooking instructions, you know, anything in print, and it will summarize it for me. And I use things like ChatGPT and Google Gemini, you know, to kind of speed that workflow up as well. So I've embraced technology, you know, in quite a big way, you know, and that's really kind of helped me overcome, you know, that sensitivity there. One of the other challenges that I do face is disorientation. You know, when you lose your peripheral vision, um, you lose that grounding that it gives you. You know, and you kind of take it for granted. So if I'm in a fast-moving environment or it's crowded, and lots of people and objects constantly coming in, it can get a little bit disorientating. So I managed this very well through doing specific exercises. I do a lot of strength training. I love lifting and carrying heavy weights, you know, kind of like strongman training, because it improves my core stability, it grounds me, and I feel a lot more safer when I'm outside. I do a lot of yoga. Um, Useful fact here, I do a lot of gymnastics, you know, which is, I've been told, you know, by many experts along the way that I'd never be able to do something like this. But for 20 years, I go to a weekly adult class in gymnastics. And it's really given me that confidence. I know how to fall safely from doing that. I have a very acute spatial awareness now. And, you know, it works for me. You know, it really has been a lifesaver. And probably the third challenge I will mention is it's getting talked about more, but it's the mental health challenge as well. You know, I'll be the first one to put my hands up and you know, kind of say that I struggled with it mentally, with coping with vision loss. But you know, it really helped me to talk to someone. You know, I have a wonderful therapist that I talk to once a month now. And I also, you know, meditate daily and I take time for myself, which is really important, you know, and that works for me. So just to kind of tie this off, I've probably got about a minute or so left. I'm going to give you kind of, I hate to call it top three tips, but I'm going to call it top three tips, you know, for living with vision loss. And, you know, these ones work for me, but I think they're quite generic. Number one, don't neglect the basics. You know, look after your health and look after your body, because there's so many little things you can do consistently in the background that will improve your health and longevity. And I'm talking about simple things like get your heart rate up, you know, every day, at least once a day, you know, whether it's gardening, walking, whatever. Um, Carry heavy objects every now and then. You know, it's great for your strength. It's great for your confidence. You know, eat fresh food, you know, eat plenty of protein, get outside in the fresh air, laugh a lot, you know, spend time with your family. You know, these are the things that people forget. But it gives you that kind of baseline health, you know, alongside all the other things that you might be doing as well. Number two, challenge yourself. You know, I've already talked about my gymnastics. You know, when someone tells me I can't do something, I'll go out and I'll do it. And I found my way to do gymnastics. You know, I can walk around on my hands, I can do somersaults, you know, and I'm severely sight impaired. So I just found a way of doing it. Go out and learn a new skill, you know, just keep challenging yourself. And probably the last one is probably the most important one is advocate for yourself. You know, whether you're sight impaired or not, I think this goes for everyone. You know, reach out if you need help. You know, find your community. and tell your story, just like I am today. It's such an empowering thing, both for yourself and hopefully for the people, who are listening to you. But I think that's about 10 minutes, I think. So I'm going to stop talking there. Look, thank you so much for listening to my story.
Perfect. Hey, Kesh, thank you so much for sharing your story. Really, really inspirational. And if you have any questions for Kesh, let me know they're for Kesh, please. And we're going to move on to Paul. And I'm just going to share his slides. So if you bear with me 1 second, and we'll be good to go again.
Hi.
Okay. Are the slides okay, Conchita?
I can see the speaker notes.
All right, bear with me a second. Just 1 second. Sorry about this, Paul.
That's all right.
Okay, now.
Here we go.
Perfect.
Great stuff. Okay. Hi, folks. I'm Paul Wallace. I'm a low vision specialist. I started working at Moorfields Eye Hospital in the low vision aid clinics there 40 years ago now. And I've worked with people who have low vision all ever since then. And I've learned quite a lot, hopefully, over that period of time. As has already been said this evening, no person, everybody is unique with their visual loss for all sorts of reasons. I can have the next slide, actually, Conchita, now. Everybody's unique because of their personality and their type of vision loss. And there's no stereotypical way.
Pete, next slide.
Yes, please. Next slide. Lovely.
All right.
There's no way of treating everybody. And initially, when I trained, it was thought of low vision aid work was effectively solving problems for people. What are the practical problems that people come across, and how do you solve those problems for them? Over the years, actually, I regarded that as rather irrelevant, frankly. When you lose vision, the most important thing is the psychological element of losing vision and what actually happens along the way. And there's a query come up already there. How do you decide whether you are visually impaired? And that's a very good question, because people came to me normally when the clinics had decided, this person is now having extreme problems. And that's basically it. Are you having a real problem with your life? Are you having difficulty doing what you really want to do? At that point, you become visually impaired, when you can't do your normal activities. But everybody's vision is different, and it's quite important to try and understand what those differences are, because they're key to understanding what is going on with other people. There's a lot of confusion as to, am I properly impaired? And there's a lot of guilt with people who are visually impaired that they're not blind enough, because 97% of people who are visually impaired have vision in some form or other. There's only 3% of people who are blind, who are totally blind, who have no vision whatsoever. That means that 97% of blind people have some form of residual vision. And this confuses the public, and it confuses the people who have the vision themselves, because they think, oh, well, I have a bit of vision, therefore, I don't think I'm really blind, and I shouldn't be doing this, and I shouldn't be asking for help for this, I shouldn't be asking for help for that, because I'm not really blind. Well, and this is the other problems, that the typical question is, can you see to drive a car? Can you read down the chart? Well, yes, you may be able to read down the chart. And in fact, with glaucoma, you may be able to read the bottom line of the chart quite happily, but you're visually impaired and you're actually technically blind. The reason is there's two components to being blind. One is that you can't see detail. And the second one is that you can't have your field of vision is impaired. So when the field of vision is impaired, it's as if you're looking down a Smartie tube or a toilet roll tube. You can only see a little hole down the middle. That is a field loss. Most people in this country who are visually impaired actually have a central field loss, so they have a diffuse loss. They can't read the bottom line of the chart, but they can walk down the street with no problems whatsoever because they have no field loss. So there's two components. You may have both components, or you may only have one component to make you visually blind. But there's a lot of confusion arises from that. But essentially, if you are having problems that you can't see something that you really need to see, then you are visually impaired. Now, going back to again to the idea of blindness, blindness is one of those things that people really, really fear. They think, oh, dearie me, I've been told I'm going to, I've got glaucoma, and everybody immediately jumps to the worst possible conclusion. Oh, I've got glaucoma today. I've been told by the optician or the ophthalmologist I got glaucoma, or the doctor. Oh, that means by the end of next week, I won't be able to see anything at all. That's pretty unlikely, very unlikely in actual fact. But your vision may get worse, but everybody jumps to the conclusion that they will have complete vision loss. Again, that is very unlikely. Why do people fear blindness? Over the years, it sounds callous. I don't think blindness is a problem, frankly. If you look at people like Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, David Blunkett, Chris McCausland, who won Strictly a couple of years ago, they have done stuff. They can do stuff quite happily. And they do it to a very high standard. Now, I'm not going to say because you've gone blind, you're going to be able to do anything to a very high standard. But losing vision is a transition. There's a transition from being a sighted person to being a visually impaired person. And it's the transition that is the really difficult part to travel through. And although I've said that everybody is individual, basically almost everybody goes through the same transition procedures, which are when people come to see me. So kind of the next card, actually, slide up. People would come to see me professionally when they were at the low point. As you see, this is something had happened to them. Next card, please, or next slide. And then they come to see me at the low point. And I'll explain what the low point is. Can I have the next slide up? Initially, if you are told you have some form of eye disease, the initial thing is panic. You think, oh no, I'm going to go blind. This is horrendous. There's no hope for me. This is going to be awful. You run around like a headless chicken in fear. That fear will be allayed to a certain extent because you will then go to the doctor or the ophthalmologist and they'll say, explain what's going to happen and how it happens and so on. You think, okay, well, yes, this, I can kind of live with this, and you learn to live with the immediate fear goes away. As I said, it's the low point when I would see people. Now, at this point, they had lost vision, and they would probably, in the case of glaucoma, it's quite likely that they would no longer be able to drive, and mobility issues were becoming a problem. So having difficulty getting around. And at this point, grief comes in because they think, oh, I'm going blind. This is horrendous. Well, how am I going to cope with it? And they suddenly think, oh, my life is changing. My life has changed. The things that I used to be able to do, I could drive to work. I could do this. I could do that. I can't do these things. And I can't do all sorts of other jobs and activities. It might be hobbies. It might be your occupation even that you can't do. And you go into a period of grieve. You have to grieve for the fact you can't do these things. And it's really unfortunate. But like all grief is almost a finite thing. It varies so much from person to person. Sometimes it's a really long period of time. Other periods it's relatively short. The intense grief, chronic grief, acute grief tends to last about 3 months or so. After that, it begins to dissipate slightly. You come to terms with the fact, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. What happens after that, though, is the fact you get incredibly frustrated. It is really frustrating that you can't do what you want to do, and you think, oh, this is really irritating. and you become quite probably obnoxious to your friends and family. It's quite feasible that that will happen, because you will be quite difficult to live with, because you can't do what you want to do. It's really frustrating, and you don't like it, and you can't do anything about it. You've lost your, you have this loss of self-esteem, because the person who you thought you were, you are no longer, because you can't do what you thought you were doing. Your life had been built up doing all these things that made you who you are, and suddenly you can't do them. So you slithered down the slippery pole. You're back to being almost like a toddler. You can't do also that. You're having to be looked after by people. You're having to get people to help you to do stuff that you think is really simple to do, and it's so horrible, really. So that is pretty horrible, but you are now going to be totally and utterly exhausted, because you're suddenly having to do stuff that you can't really do. Today, I've actually been looking after my 18-month-old grandson, and frankly, I'm a bit exhausted now. We are all creatures of habits. That's the way that we get through life, is by having a whole load of habits. When we get up in the morning, I get dressed in a certain way. I go to the toilet and the bath and all that kind of stuff. I get dressed. I go and have my breakfast. I do all these things by habit. I know how to drive the car by habit. I know how to go shopping by habit. I know where to buy this and that. All these things are habits. Human beings are designed to have habits. It is energy saving. And we are always trying to, as human beings, we're always trying to save energy, and habits help us save energy constantly. When you lose vision, and it's why people fear vision loss, is because they recognize that they're going to lose all those habits that they just take for granted, and they've got to start again from the beginning, and they've got to create new habits. But it is exhausting trying to create and do these new habits and learn them. So you're absolutely exhausted, you can't get around, you're listless, and you don't want to do anything. And it's very difficult to deal with it. And it depends on the time of life that you get this kind of thing as well. The younger you are when this happens, the easier it is to deal with, because you have more energy and you have more life ahead of you. If you're older, if you're in your mid-70s or something like that, which is where a lot of glaucoma cases happen, it can be quite difficult to deal with this, because you think, I can't cope with doing all these new things like learning Braille and doing all sorts of things like that. You won't learn Braille at the age of 75. You might learn Braille at the age of 20. You can certainly learn Braille at the age of 5. These are very different times of life, and the ability to cope with things is like that at those different times. So age is very, very critical. But going back to the energy saving, eventually what is going to happen is that you will find new habits, and that is what you have to do to get the transition from being a sighted person to a coping, living successfully person with vision loss. You have to create new habits, and you have to do that slowly, bit by bit. One day at a time, you solve one problem. The next day, you solve another problem. The day after that, you solve a problem as well. And after 50 days, if you solve a problem a day, you solve 50 problems. And effectively, you probably won't have many problems after 50 days. You've learned to cope with it. You are then through the transition. You are then a successful visually impaired person. You can become like Chris McCausland and take part in Strictly. And you'll win it, maybe, hopefully. So I don't have a great problem with vision loss, being perfectly honest. It is a case of solving problems, though, and problem solving is the main thing about vision loss. How do I solve this problem? What is it? Define it. And the best thing to do is settle down with a teenager and have a brainstorming session on how to solve problems. And if you do that one job at a time, you won't have a problem with losing vision. I think that's probably what I want to say, Peter.
Great. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much, Cash. Really interesting. And let's head straight to the questions. And the first question I've got here is, what about swimming and goggles to protect eyes and feeling safe in a pool? Pilates and downwards positions. I think, Kesh, this one could go to you.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly give my perspective of having done both of those. Swimming, the short answer is psychologically, definitely, get some goggles. If it just, I've had this for a long time, so I'm always kind of a little bit paranoid about getting things in my eyes, and I have sensitive eyes. So for me, goggles work, especially in the sea. But swimming pools, absolutely. And what was it? Inverted positions in.
Pilates and downward positions.
Yeah, I mean, I would always check with your ophthalmologist, as I do with myself. I've been doing a lot of these inverted positions in yoga and gymnastics for a long time. I don't spend a lot of time in those positions. It's literally just no more than 10 seconds, but that works for me, and you've got to breathe through it as well. But, before going any further, do check, with your consultant.
Great. Next one I think is for you, Paul. Is someone visually impaired if the vision in their one good eye is normal, but they have vision loss in the other eye?
Um, yeah, the losing vision in one eye is an interesting one because, I mean, it the classic is the case would be if somebody lost an eye in a car accident, you've literally got only one eye left, and people are obviously highly sympathetic in that situation. Say, "Oh, you've lost an eye. Oh my God, that's terrible," but it doesn't matter because you've got the other eye. Well, it actually takes, in my experience, about 6 months for somebody to come to terms with the loss of one eye because you've lost binocular vision. And so judging distances is very difficult. And so if you're parking a car, it's very difficult to judge how wide the car is or how far away the bonnet is from a lamppost or something, or if cars are coming towards you, what the speed of those cars are and how quickly they're coming towards you. So that kind of thing is quite difficult. Technically, you wouldn't be registered as partially sighted because of that if you had one normal eye, but the other eye was damaged or you didn't have one, because a lot of people only ever have one eye, but they're not registered as partially sighted.
Right. Thank you for that. Right. The next question here is, I have advanced glaucoma, but I do not experience field loss as being like looking down a smarty tube. Why is this? I relate far more to the contrast problems Kesh described.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, the problem is that vision loss is incredibly difficult to describe quickly and simply and easily. The retina is what you see with, and that is a 30mm piece of nerve fibers at the back of the eye, like the film in an old camera. The central 2mm of that is called the fovea, and that has all the detail in it. And then you have the rods going out from there, and they give you the peripheral vision. Now, you can damage all sorts of bits of the eye. You could damage the whole of the macula, you could damage the whole of the retina, the rest of the retina, or you could damage a bit of the retina. So it varies so much from individual to individual. The saying about the smarty tube is a quick cheat way of explaining it. It gives a vague impression to people who've got no idea what's going on, but it isn't the case. That would actually apply much more to a case of what's called retinitis pigmentosa, and they have a vision that's like looking down a smarty tube. Glaucoma is much more diffuse than that and will vary tremendously from person to person. So it's really, really difficult. One of the things that really gets me is people say, "Oh, I have I have 80% vision in my left eye and 20% vision in my right eye. And I have no idea what they mean by that. And I've been in the business for 40 years. It it's a really difficult, it kind of means something and nothing. It's a shorthand which is vaguely used because it depends on whether you're talking about the macula or whether you're talking about the field of view.
Right.
So sorry, that's a bit of a vague answer.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. We're all individual, as we keep saying.
Yeah.
Right. Next question. It's a long one. I had 2 trabeculectomies 1 month ago. I had glaucoma, glaucoma implant on my right eye. I have lost more than 30% of my peripheral vision. The doctors told me the law has been changed recently and I am not eligible to register as sight impaired, but I am struggling at my work on a computer longer hours. And yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's you had 2 trabeculectomies 1 month ago. Yeah. It's difficult to know what's going on there in some ways without actually examining you, being perfectly honest. I would recommend that you went and got your eyes examined by an optometrist. One of the problems with eye diseases is that people think, oh, I've got this eye disease, whatever it happens to be. And the hospital are looking after me because they're giving me drops or they're giving me surgery or they're doing this, that, or the other. And they don't actually necessarily think, well, I need to go and see the optometrist to get my eyes tested. Because it sounds as if you may have a problem. If you're struggling with a computer for long hours, you might need to have your eyes tested for glasses because there's all sorts of problems that you could have that would be sorted out with a new pair of glasses. You might need what are called prisms in the glasses if you're struggling on a computer for long periods. I don't know, but I would certainly recommend that as a first step.
Right. Thank you. Okay, you're getting off lightly, Kesh, but this one is for you. Just 1 second. Sorry, it's jumped a bit. I have been told to keep my eyes at all times above my heart and have reluctantly given yoga up. Don't you find the pressure in your eyes becomes too heavy when you do yoga?
Yes, is I guess the short answer to that. It's more, I know the pressures do increase. I mean, you do get transient increases in intraocular pressure when you do inverted positions. That's absolutely right. But as you know, my ophthalmologist keeps telling me, you know, that the long-term benefits of doing any type of regular activity, which may or may not include inverted positions, far outweighs, you know, those transient short-term, you know, I guess things like increases in intraocular pressure. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, if you do them for long periods of time, as you know, some yoga practices do, then, you know, you might actually feel it physically. I do understand that feeling that you might be talking about if that's what you're relating to. But I certainly don't practice long inverted postures, as I know some people do. And again, I would refer you back, you know, to your ophthalmologist and just make sure he knows everything you do on your physical activity side. And, you know, I'm sure he'll be able to, I'm sure he'll probably be fine with that and make any recommendations or mods that you need to, you know, to your yoga. Doesn't mean you have to stop doing yoga. You may just have to modify it slightly.
Great advice. Thank you. Next one's for you again, Kesh. Do you feel vulnerable when you're out and about, Kesh?
Absolutely. You know, I still do. I've had this condition for a long time. I mean, interestingly, I didn't mention this, but I'm currently undergoing long cane training because I'm kind of protecting myself, I guess, in gaining new skills for the future. And, you know, so far that's been a really kind of daunting but really exciting kind of venture. And I'm also applying for a guide dog because I seem to tick the boxes for that. But Other than that, if you saw me down the street, you wouldn't probably most people wouldn't know I'm sight impaired, and have vision impairment. I do feel vulnerable, especially as I said before, in crowded places. But you know what? Some of the things I outlined before, especially when it comes to exercise, and specific exercises, you can dramatically reduce those feelings. Relaxation plays a big part in that as well. From breathing techniques to just taking a knee and pausing for a moment, and then continuing. But in answer to your question, yes, I do. But there are many ways to manage it. Many ways I wish I'd learned 25 years ago.
Great. Excellent. Okay, the next one is for you again, Kesh. Sorry about this. We're on a roll
Okay.
here. When you say disorientating, do you feel dizzy or unstable on your feet?
Both. The dizziness is very mild. It's more like a giddiness, when maybe you've had like a glass of wine and you stand up suddenly, not enough to kind of make you feel vulnerable and fall over. I do get these transient losses of stability or unsteadiness. So, if I turn my head too quickly, my peripheral vision's not there and it doesn't catch up, I feel a bit unsteady. And if you were a close observer, you might see me kind of sway. This is why, I'm standing up right now. I don't sit down a lot. I stand up at my desk, I'm constantly moving around. And I find that helps. The movement really does help that. But that's kind of what I mean.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. Next question. I'll go back to you, Paul. How can I access coaching or training in using technology to adapt to low vision loss?
It varies an awful lot from area to area, tremendously. There are all sorts of groups. You could, your local hospital, if you're lucky, they may have what's called an ECLO, an education officer who will help you, point you in the direction of help. Or if you go through the local charities, there may be a local blind association, or I think it's quite difficult to say because it's so difficult in different localities that I can't give you a blanket answer on that one. You do have to find your own way, unfortunately, on that one to a certain extent. But you keep asking locally about that, and eventually you will find the best person to give you help locally. But I have no idea who it might be for you as an individual.
Sure.
But the technology is incredibly helpful. But again, it's a tricky one. And again, locally, it's quite likely that there will be people who will help you with technology. But again, that's very, very variable. But I love technology because as far as I was concerned, the most useful piece of kit that came out during my whole career of 40 years was actually the iPhone, because the iPhone is such a flexible tool with so many things on it that people don't appreciate. But you don't know that they're on there. They are on there very often, and there are loads and loads of apps, but it is a case of trying to find somebody who will help you out with it. I love 15-year-olds because 15-year-olds know an awful lot about technology. The problem is that they will gabble at you and say, oh yeah, you do this, and you've got no idea what they've just told you. You need somebody with patience to explain it to you. ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, is actually quite a useful guide. If you can use or get somebody to ask artificial intelligence or use it yourself to ask questions like, how do I get my computer to do this or to do that? And ChatGPT will probably explain it to you quite effectively. And so I would recommend using ChatGPT or the other language models, AI versions on the different browsers for that, because they would be very, very helpful for using technology.
Great. Thank you. Right. We have a few more questions to get through. I have vision loss in one eye, and sometimes I feel vulnerable when I am out and about. Is it legal for me to wear a visual impaired lanyard?
Do you want me to answer that one?
Please.
Yeah. Yes, certainly. You can use you can use the lanyard, or you can use a stick. White sticks are an interesting area. People don't understand white sticks. There's two uses, but there's two types of stick that you can use. One is a signal cane. Now, a signal cane is like a collapsible concertina type cane, which collapses into about 6 bits, and you sort of let go, and it springs out into one long stick. The purpose of that is not really to get you around. The purpose of that is to show other people that you have a visual impairment. So it's for other people. It's not for you. The other type of stick is the long cane. Now, the long cane is to get you around. So that if you're having difficulty getting around because you're not sure if something's there, you can effectively poke about with a long cane to find out whether something is there and to help your mobility. So those two sticks are quite different, and they have different uses. There's, again, a lot of confusion within the blind community. If you just want to indicate to people that you have a visual impairment, then the signal cane, I think they cost about 10 quid from the RNIB. You can get them by post. Are very useful, and you can, if you're a woman, you can keep that in your handbag or your shopping bag, and most of the time it might be in there, but you suddenly think, oh, hang on a minute, I'm getting into difficulty here. You just reach into your shopping bag, pull your white cane out and hold it and spring it open, and that will kind of indicate to people that you're having a problem, and hopefully they'll think, oh yeah, she's got a problem, he's got a problem. So yeah, white canes are interesting.
Okay. I don't think this is a question. I have found Paul's description on sight loss really helpful. I panicked last year when I thought I would lose total loss in one of my eyes. I felt I was making a fuss about my fear, but now know how normal that feeling is. I haven't lost total sight in one eye, but reduced vision. Adapting to change and realizing there are things I can no longer do, i.e., craft work using audio books to help with reading. I am on a journey. I think what a great way to end the webinar. We've got no more questions. Everybody's on a journey with their sight loss. I'd really like to thank you both very much, Kesh and Paul. I'm just going to share my last slide and wrap up proceedings. Before I do that, I will launch the second poll. The second poll is launched now. And I'd like to thank everybody for their questions. I hope you've all found it enlightening and insightful this evening. I know I have. And okay. So, I've launched the last poll.
Pete,
Yeah.
can your screens need adjusting.
All right. Okay. No problem. Bear with me a second. Sorry about that. Is it okay, Conchita, now?
No, I can
No,
still see speaker notes.
it's playing up. Right. Can't get the slide to work properly at the end. Please have a look at our website for the next 2 webinars that will be coming up. And you will receive a request for feedback as well. Please let us have the feedback. It helps us to improve every time and try and get these better and better. And a massive thank you to Paul and Kesh and Conchita for all the work in the background. and have a lovely evening, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.